How about that? Appreciate you guys coming today very much. I am going to ask you guys to do something. I think we're going to start doing this on a regular basis. And I want you guys, when we have warrior training, to bring two things. One of these and a notebook. Can you guys do that? So if you don't have a hard copy of the Bible, pester your parents. Tell them, hey, Mr. Brad says I need a copy of the Bible, okay, for warrior training. And then also, why would I ask you guys to bring a notebook? Take notes. This is going to be kind of a fun session where if you guys have got just burning questions, you can ask me. If we get really, really bogged down with questions, I may ask you to hold some of them till the end, but this is going to be more of a learning session, okay? I want everybody to remember this picture that I'm putting on the screen right now. Somebody tell me what you think that particular picture represents. Yeah, one of you guys.
Evolution and like theories of it.
Yeah, so one of the ways in which they are getting you guys to give up your faith is not by directly attacking the cross, but rather they're attacking the foundation on which the cross rests. And the number one way they do it, the very first way that they usually do it in your life is through these creatures right here. Because there's not that many 4 or 5-year-olds who are not absolutely enthralled with dinosaurs. In fact, if you think about it, you probably started collecting or thinking about dinosaurs when you were about 3, 4, 5 years old. It started when you were young. And I tell parents, if you haven't stepped on a plastic dinosaur figurine in the middle of the night, you're not qualified yet, okay? Because the pain from stepping on that is only second to one other thing. Legos, absolutely. They love to put pictures of dinosaurs on the cover of magazines. Why do you think they might do that? Because they know they're going to sell more magazines that way and sell more books. It's not just you guys that are interested in it. It's also adults that are interested in them. And so they tell us things like where they were found, what they think they were eating, all kinds of stuff about them. Like, for instance, this guy right here, the Dinosaurs, one of the largest dinosaurs we know walked the earth. They estimate this guy to be 110 tons. Now, if you want to see a replica of this guy, you got to go to the Fernbank Museum in Atlanta, where he stretches from one end of the museum to the next. And just to give you guys an idea how big he really is, if you look right over here, see that thing right there? That's a full-size T-Rex that doesn't come up to his hip bone. He was huge. But it's because of these dinosaurs that in too many cases we're losing a lot of our kids. And let me tell you how that's happening. Let's start with somebody at Rolling Hills about age 3, maybe age 4. We start filling up our house with all kinds of dinosaur paraphernalia, dinosaur figurines, games, you name it, they make it. And some of you grandparents in this room, you're probably guilty of buying some of this stuff. They hit about age 4. It's February, Tennessee, not July, okay? Mom, she's over there. She is mixing up some instant oatmeal. All the while, the child is reading that package and learning about evolution. They hit about age 5. At age 5, you know what everybody wants? Snacks. So what do we get them? We get them snacks. All the while they're learning about dinosaurs and evolution. They hit about age 7 or 8, finally old enough to take them to a fine dining establishment. So we go somewhere like Wendy's, right? In fact, you just go through the drive-through. But I want you to notice, take a look at this square right here. What's in big red letters? Fact. But then what does it say under that? New findings show that birds are probably related to dinosaurs. But that's a fact. Does that seem kind of silly? Oh, yeah, they do that all the time. Yes, sir. Yeah, and we're going to even talk about that a little bit more. So this is a Wendy's kids meal bag. Maybe you guys don't like Wendy's. Anybody in here like McDonald's? I know my daughter's hand, yeah, her hand's going up. Arby's. Again, they're teaching you guys about evolution. You get a little bit older. So now let's say that you are age 9, 10, you start taking field trips to museums. And when you walk in those museums, you know what they have a lot of times? They have placards that are teaching things like the Triassic period, the Jurassic period, and they're telling you this stuff is hundreds of millions of years old. Or maybe you go somewhere like the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., or maybe you go to that Fernbank Museum in Atlanta. Or how about this? Maybe you go to the Field Museum where Sue is on display. Sue is one of the most intact T-Rexes around. Now, I took that picture, and I want you to think about this, moms and dads in the room. How many parents of these kids do you think actually thought about what their kids would be reading on those placards when they signed a permission slip for them to go on a field trip? Because again, I took the picture and I also took a picture of what they're reading, and there's no way to harmonize what they're reading with God's word. Get a little older. Now you are age 10. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with the Magic School Bus in this room? Okay, we got some older readers over there. That's good. Take a look at this particular page out of the Magic School Bus. It's got a picture of a dinosaur chasing a caveman, right? But notice what the little boy says. He says, this story is make-believe, and his friend says, there were no dinosaurs in the time of cave people. In fact, up here says no people ever saw a dinosaur. When early humans appeared on the earth, dinosaurs had already been dead for millions of years. People found out about dinosaurs from fossils. Or maybe you guys like the Magic Treehouse. Any of you guys remember that one? Okay, this one, you don't even get into the book. You're still in the introduction, and notice what it says. It talks about dinosaurs living millions of years ago, but then it also talks about human beings have not yet, what's that next word? Evolved. And in fact, in the middle of this particular book, it's got a timeline that basically is showing dinosaurs live way down here, humans finally come into the picture right over here. All right, I'm gonna get one of you guys right here. Which one of you got a Bible? Looking at each other like, ugh. That's why we gotta have Bibles in warrior training. Look at Mark chapter 10, verse 6. Read it really, really loudly for us. Mark chapter 10, verse 6. And you adults can flip over there too. Now, the words are probably going to be in red in some of your Bibles. So who does that mean is talking? It's Jesus. All right, go ahead, real loud. Okay, so Jesus is talking, and he says, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Look back up here on my timeline. How do you harmonize Jesus's words with that timeline? The answer is you can't. So either the Bible is correct, which it is, or this book is correct. It's not. So let's talk about, you get a little older. Now you're in like 8th grade, 9th grade. You got to take science classes, and maybe you get a book titled Evolution, Change Over Time. Now, here's a question. Any of you guys think they might use dinosaurs to try to convince you of evolution in this book? Like if we opened it up and we start counting the pages, like page 10, page 16, page 25, 28, 29, 36, page 38, 39, 46, page 66, page 98, page 99. Out of 100 pages in this book, roughly a third of them have pictures or information about dinosaurs. So does anybody think they use dinosaurs to teach evolution? Yeah. Let's make sure we all understand what the dilemma is, and this is for old and young alike. Most media today is teaching kids that dinosaurs died out roughly 65 million years ago, and that we came along carrying our clubs about 3 million years ago. Is that what this teaches? I'll tell you, this right here says that there was a 6-day creation, correct? Question, what day were all land-dwelling creatures created on? Day 6, he is correct. Remember, water dwellers and flyers came on day 5. Land dwellers, day 6. All right, follow-up question, what day was man created on? Day 6. Here's what that means. That means if the Bible is correct, we had to coexist. We had to live at the same time. Now, I'm going to show you some proof tonight that that's the case, but I need you to understand, if the Bible is true and there really is a creation account, that means Adam and Eve were around when dinosaurs were around. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Couple of real quick things. Romans chapter 5, verse 12 says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, thus death spread to all men because all sin. I'm going to ask an older person, what brought death into the world? Okay. Okay, he answered correctly, gave a longer answer than I was looking for, but that's good. He said, Adam and Eve eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. According to this verse, sin brought death into the world, right? Do you guys realize if evolution is true, how much death would have to take place? I mean, things evolving, dying. Basically, the Garden of Eden would be on a graveyard of dead stuff. And yet, the Bible says, no. What brought death into the picture was sin. All right, 2 questions. Did they really exist? What do you think? Yes, you are correct. You know how we know that? We got physical evidence. So this is a picture of a 3-toed dinosaur track over in Scotland. This is one, I threw this in there for David, so hopefully he'll watch this sometime. This is from Italy. This is another one from over around Scotland. This one's in Thailand. So we've got physical evidence that dinosaurs existed, right? Moms and dads in this room, it does not do your kids any favor to say that these were mythological or magical, and then they come into face-to-face contact with a 2-story tall T-Rex skeleton, okay? They really did exist. We found their fossilized remains on all 7 continents. Arctic to Antarctic and everywhere in between. I had a buddy who came back from Antarctica several years ago, called me up, he said, guess what we found? In Antarctica, by the way, more dinosaur fossils. So yeah, we know. I was getting off a plane in Oregon, I had a guy call me, he said, hey Brad, we need you to come to our church. I thought he meant to speak. He said, no, we got bones. It's like, what are y'all doing? Sure enough, they were adding on an addition to their building, and in the massive hole where they were putting the foundation, they had all kinds of bones. And so we took hours carving them out, taking pictures of them, measuring them. I tell people, in my computer, I got loads of pictures of those. If you don't think there's dinosaurs in the church, I got pictures of them, okay? Question is not, did they exist? The real question is that. So here's what I want you guys right here to remember. Anytime you hear the words million or billion, immediate red flag, okay? Because more than likely what they're trying to convince you of goes against the Bible. We're going to look at how we know that for sure. So, for those of you who brought notepads, I want you to write down the year 1845. 1845 is when this guy right here, let me back up, he actually made the word dinosaur. He came up with it, used two Greek words, Dinosaurs, translated by him as fearfully great lizard. His name is Sir Richard Owen, 1845. I want you guys to put that right up here somewhere where you remember it, okay? Because I'm going to ask you about it in a little bit. 1845. By the way, your Bible had been translated in English in the year 1611. So a long time before, right? 1845 is really when kind of we became fascinated with these creatures. Let's look at some evidence about when these things existed. April 29, 2013, researchers discovered skin from a hadrosaur. Now, notice what this isn't. This is not a fossil. This is actual skin. On one of these up here, let's see where it went. This one right here. So I brought with me, in fact, you guys can come up and mess with it, touch it. This is fossilized dinosaur skin. That up there is still soft. Why is that a big deal? Yeah, soft tissue shouldn't stick around for millions and millions of years, right? Or how about this? 2005, there was a research very quietly announced where they found a dinosaur fossilized in the belly of a mammal. So you got a mammal that was chewing on a dinosaur. Why is that a big deal? That's a pretty big deal because according to the evolutionary timeline, warm-blooded mammals didn't come into the picture until much, much later. And yet, you got a mammal that was eating on them. Or how about this one? That is a cylinder seal that was found in Mesopotamia. Looks an awful lot like that guy right there, doesn't it? Or while we're digging in the ground, while we're looking at artifacts, these tablets were discovered near the pyramids in Egypt. And if you look carefully on both of them, that right there, these long neck guys right there, what do they kind of look like? Kind of look like dinosaurs, right? The next one's one of my favorites. So over in Cambodia, there is a temple that was uncovered only about 15 to 18 years ago. It had been completely covered over with vegetation. They came in with what you and I would call Roundup, except it was industrial strength Roundup. They killed everything, pulled back the vines. When they did that, they were able to actually see all the beautiful carvings in this particular temple. Now, keep in mind, this thing was built about 800 years ago, okay? And when they looked at it, here's what they discovered. Somebody tell me what that guy is right there. I'll tell you, that's his face, front legs, back legs, his tail kind of goes up behind him. What's that look like? Tiger, a little bit smaller than a tiger, yeah. A monkey or an ape, yeah. So see his long tail? What about this guy right here? A deer, absolutely. You see his antlers, tail in the up position. But the artist didn't just stop with things like monkey and deer. He also carved, what's that? Yeah, what kind? Anybody know the kind? Yeah, help him out. Stegosaurus. It is definitely looking like a stegosaurus. Now, here's the funny thing. So, I'm trained in science. That's my background, okay? And so one of the things I love is firsthand data. I had a buddy that was going over to Cambodia. I said, look, you got to get me real pictures, firsthand pictures. And these are some of his that he gave me. But here's the funny part. When he's taking the tour of this particular place, He said, I came up to one of the columns that had dinosaurs on it. I'm taking pictures. I turned to the tour guide and I asked him, hey, how do you explain this? And he said the tour guide's exact words were, I know what you're thinking, but we're supposed to tell you it's a porcupine. That look like a porcupine to anybody in here? No. Or how about these, the Ica stones from Peru? A guy by the name of Dr. Javier Cabrera was given one of these stones as a birthday gift, and he noticed it had these elegant carvings of dinosaurs on it. So he asked the native farmer who had given it to him, he said, hey, where'd you get this? The farmer explained, he said, these are burial stones that the ancient Incans would place into their tombs. Dr. Cabrera set out to find as many of these stones as he could. All told, he found about 11,000 of them. Roughly a third of them have very elegant pictures of dinosaurs. Not just dinosaurs, in many cases, they got dinosaurs and what? And people. Now, how did they know what to carve if they'd never seen it? Or maybe somebody could explain to me this poncho that a buddy of mine, guy by the name of Steve Austin, he actually has these in his possession. Or maybe you guys can tell me about the petroglyphs in Natural Bridges National Monument. If you go there today, there are 3 of those natural sandstone bridges, one of which is called Kachina, and it's on that particular sandstone bridge that the Anasazi Indians, they carved all kinds of things. You can go there today, literally, and see things like bighorn sheep and things like dinosaurs. Or how about this? That textile. It's in the museum in Peru, identified as a dinosaur. Or how about going over to England? Yeah.
I have 2 dinosaur books. 2 of them are like scientists today.
Yeah.
And one of them is actually like written by Christians.
Awesome. I brought some books up here for your moms and dads to look at afterwards that are actually teaching good stuff instead of some of the stuff that they teach out there. So, yes, sir.
So when I was in school, I was reading a book and it said dinosaurs were made before like farm animals and people.
That dinosaurs did what?
Were alive before like farm animals and people.
That they were alive with farm animals and people? Oh, before farm animals and people. Yeah, those are the kind of books we got to watch out for. So if you ever get to go over to England, go up north to what's called the Lake District. How many of you in here have ever heard of Beatrix Potter? What's the rabbit's name? Peter Rabbit, thank you. Any of you heard? Okay, so in the north part of that, you can like go through her house. There's a little town called Carlisle, and this cathedral sitting in the middle of that particular town. That building is older than the United States of America. And the reason I know that, there's people that are buried in the floor of that cathedral. In fact, below that carpet, there's a guy by the name of Richard Bell. He's buried there, died in 1496. He's not the oldest guy in the floor, okay? When did I tell you guys the word dinosaur was coined? 1845. This guy died, round numbers, about 350 years before the word even came into existence. If you go there today and you have them pull back that protective carpet that's over his tomb, or if you got 4 young children that'll do it for you and don't know any better, and you get down on your hands and your knees, you'll start noticing in the bronze things like fish. Everybody see that little fish? You see the dog? What's that? Dinosaurs. 350 years before the word even came into existence. Or maybe you could explain that Mayan vase, again, dating to about 100 AD. This is kind of a cool thing. Dr. Samuel Hubbard, he was wanting to prove that the American Indians had been here longer than we were giving them credit. So he set out on an expedition into the Grand Canyon. You can read about it. It's called the Doheny Expedition. He went down into the Grand Canyon off one of the side canyons called the Havasupai Canyon. And he was looking for things like their pottery, their clothing, anything that would prove, yeah, the American Indians had been here. Well, he found his proof. He found their clothing, he found their pottery, but he also stumbled across their cave art. So etched into those canyon walls, there were images that had taken men hours to carve out. You say, all right, pictures of what? Well, let's see. There was buffalo, sheep, dinosaurs, oxen, men. Run that list by me one more time. Buffalo, sheep, oxen, men, and dinosaurs. In fact, I want you to read what he had to say regarding this. He said, taken all in all, the proportions are good. He says, the huge reptile is depicted in the attitude in which man would most likely see it. Reared on his hind legs, balancing with a long tail, either feeding or in a fighting position, possibly defending himself against a party of what? Men. He says, the fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. He said, the fact that the animal is upright and balanced on his tail would seem to indicate the prehistoric artist must have seen it, what's the last word? Alive. Now, I brought a picture of what Dr. Hubbard found. And I hate to tell you guys, that right there is not an ox. It's not a sheep. It's not a cat, but it's an awfully good representation of a dinosaur that we now know existed called the Edmontosaurus. How would they know how to carve that guy without ever seeing it? By the way, everybody see this little white hole right there? Guess what that is? Let's see who can get there. She said a bullet hole. She's right. By an evolutionist who wanted to destroy it, moms and dads. What about soft tissue? We talked a little bit about that up front, but what do we know about soft tissue? So if you look on that picture right there, does that look like that's been dead for 65 million years? That's still soft tissue, isn't it? So a lady by the name of Mary Schweitzer was working in the Hell Creek Formation in Montana. I actually got to talk to her. And she told me, she said, they found this by accident. They found the femur of a T-Rex. Everybody know what femur is? Long bone, big bone, right? Except on a T-Rex, it's really big. She said they encased it in a protective material like plaster Paris. They rented a helicopter. The helicopter landed, and she said that's when we realized our mistake, because that massive block wouldn't fit on the helicopter. She said we realized we were going to have to cut it in two. She laughed. She told me, she said, if you think renting a taxi in New York City is expensive, try renting a helicopter in Montana. They cut it right down the middle, and when they did that, they could actually look inside the bone where they found soft tissue, blood vessels, and what she thinks are blood cells. Now, hopefully I don't have to tell you guys, soft tissue, blood vessels, that stuff doesn't stick around for 65 million years, does it? So I asked her the one question that I thought was pretty smart. I said, why do you think we've never found soft tissue in dinosaur bones before? Her answer kind of sent a chill right up my spine. She said, maybe because we've never thought to look. Now think about that for just a minute. If you find a dinosaur bone and I come running up to you with a hammer and say, hey, let's bust that open, you'd be like, no, because that bone, we always thought the bone was the prize, right? We now know inside the bone, there may be a bigger prize. Since Mary Schweitzer's discovery, there have been 16 additional soft tissue fossils found in dinosaurs. That's a problem for the evolutionary camp, a big, big problem. A couple of years ago, I took Reese on a dinosaur dig to the Hell Creek Formation in Montana. If you ever want to see dinosaur stuff, that's where you want to go, okay? It is like dinosaur utopia. There are footprints, bones, all kinds of really cool stuff. I got permission from a lady by the name of Marge to film a documentary on her ranch. She's got thousands of acres. I called her and I said, look, I'm a creationist. I don't believe dinosaurs have been dead that long. And she laughed and she said, Sugar, I know they ain't been dead that long. She went on to tell me how she had this massive collection of dinosaur stuff. And I kind of thought maybe she was embellishing. She wasn't embellishing. She got a better museum than some of the big museums I've been to. I would show you guys some video from her, but her language is a mixture between a sailor and a Cajun. Okay, it's spicy. It's not good. We got permission to basically dig, find all kinds of stuff. And while we were there, we did. We found some cool dinosaur bones, got to dig some stuff up. We had 2 Suburbans rented. We were going from one location to the next. And as we're crossing this massive, just empty place, she pointed over to a ridge and she said, do you see that right there? She said, that's where Mark found his Triceratops horn. Now, I know God's amazing, right? But I was thinking, there's no way she's talking about the same Mark that I'm thinking about. I looked at her, I said, you're not talking about Mark Armitage, are you? She said, yeah, right over there. That's where he found his Triceratops horn. Now, I knew about this because I'd been keeping up with it in the news. This was a guy who for 20 years, he worked in a California university laboratory. He found soft tissue in a Triceratops horn. He got it published in a peer-reviewed journal. The day that it came out online, they fired him. In fact, one of the people in his department walked into his lab and said, we will not have your religion in our department. Now keep in mind, he never mentioned God. He didn't mention creation. He was just reporting what he found. So, picture yourself. You're in Montana. We're collecting stuff. While we're there, she whips out Ziploc bags and says, anything y'all find you can take with you. Which, if you know anything about archaeology, that's a big deal. Because normally you don't get to keep anything. So, for instance, that's part of a vertebra that we found while we were there. Part of a backbone of a dinosaur. We're over there. I asked her, I said, hey, can we go look at where he pulled that Triceratops horn out? And sure enough, we go over there. Now, you guys know I got 3 scruffy boys, right? One little princess who's getting older, sad to say. I don't know why, but Marge took a liking to Claire. And I watched her go over to the back of one of the Suburbans and she pulled out an ice cream bucket. And you know the plastic ice cream bucket? Packed full of dinosaur bones, skin impressions, teeth, all kinds of really cool stuff. And she just handed it off to Claire. She said, here, sugar, you can have this. To which I said, give that to Daddy. We're standing there and Marge looks at me. She goes, you know, I got Mark's telephone number. You ought to call him. At which point I was kind of like a teenage girl at a Justin Bieber concert. I called him, told him, I said, look, I want to interview you for this documentary. Any possible chance that you got some time that we can sit down together? He told me, he said, Brad, I'm doing a speech in California. Not only will I let you interview, he said, I'll bring some of the soft tissue, some of the microscopes I've got. We'll look at it together. And so we did. We sat down, looked at some of his stuff. He's got cells that are so well preserved. He has 2 laboratories that have offered to culture them. I got to make sure you guys understand what that means. That means they think they can make them grow. He's got all kinds of really cool stuff. By the way, anybody think that cells like these are going to stick around through 65 million Montana winters? No. Last year, he actually had another paper published where he found a blood clot in I think it was a T-Rex. I promise you guys, I can stand up here. So this is kind of my condensed version. I can stand up here and show you slide after slide after slide of evidence of humans coexisting with dinosaurs. I am going to show you one more that I think is really, really cool. Take a look at this one. What we got right here? Three-toed dinosaur track, right? What's in the front of it? That's a human footprint. How do you get a, by the way, this one has been verified by a CT scan. How do you get a human footprint in the front of a three-toed dinosaur if we're separated by 65 million years? You don't. So somebody asked the question, all right, then why aren't they mentioned in the Bible? It's not a fair question. And the reason I say it's not a fair question, what year did I tell you guys the word dinosaur actually came into existence? 1845. What year was your Bible translated into English? 1611. How do you get a word in a book that's translated 1611 if that word doesn't come along for another 200 plus years? Yes, sir. He said, does the Bible have a word for dinosaurs? Have you got a Bible with you? Can you look on Carter's? Turn to the book of Job. Moms and dads in this room, you can also find these in the book of Isaiah, book of Psalm. I encourage you. Go home, do a little word study. Yes, sir. You are absolutely 100% right. So let me set it up. Job loses all his stuff, right? He's kind of in misery. Thankfully, he's got a real supportive wife who tells him just curse God and die. He doesn't do that. Instead, what you guys read for the next 25 plus chapters in the Bible is a dialogue between Job and some of his friends. He's got Eliphaz, he's got Bildad, he's got another friend named Zophar. And basically, they're nosy. They want to know what he did because they assume God is really getting on to him. Job says, I didn't do anything. And so for roughly 25 chapters, what they're trying to do is they're saying, Job, you need to repent. You've angered God. What'd you do? And finally, Job requests to speak to God. In fact, in Job chapter 13, verse 22, he phrases it this way. He says, you can go first or I'll go first. It doesn't matter to me. Well, in Job chapter 38, guess who shows up on the scene? God. Bible says this, Job chapter 38, starting in verse 1, the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Prepare yourself like a man. I will question you and you'll answer me. God basically saying, stand up, young man. We're fixing to have a chat. And for the next 4 chapters, you know what God does? He asked Job question after question after question, many of which we still don't know today. Things like, hey, Job, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Or what about the eagle and the hawk, Job? How do they fly? Or where's the dwelling place of light? Or what about snow and hail? How do I make those? Then he asks this question. Job chapter 40, verse 15. Look now at the behemoth which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. And what's a behemoth? Some of you guys may have Bibles that have a footnote that say that this is either an elephant or a hippopotamus. Now, I'm going to remind you guys, footnotes are not inspired, okay? But we'll go along with you for a minute. Let's look at the description of this creature, see if we can figure it out. In verse 16, it says, lo, now his strength is in his loins. The force is in the navel of his belly. So this guy got a big belly, right? That guy have a big belly? That guy have a big belly? What about him? Oh, yeah. Keep reading. Job chapter 40, verse 17. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. So when it's talking about cedars here, it's going to be talking about some massive trees. In fact, when I teach students, like preaching students, I always tell them, think about going to the northwest sector of the country where the redwoods and the sequoias are, the ones you can't get your hands around. And you say, how do you know that, Mr. Brad? Well, when you do a word study in the Bible on cedars, remember it was the cedars of Lebanon that were used to build the temple? These were huge trees, and yet here's God. He's describing this creature. He says he moves his tail like a cedar. Here's a question. That look like a cedar to anybody? How about that? That's getting a whole lot closer, isn't it? You say, okay, but Mr. Brad, you got a problem because Job, actually, before we go there, let's talk about this guy. Job chapter 41, can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Yes, sir.
People today think that the Leviathan was just a creature.
Yeah?
But the Bible has hard evidence that it is not at all just a creature. It actually is alive that comes.
You are correct.
And in the 1800s, two people shot down something like a pterosaur with protested life.
You are correct. You've done your homework. I like it. I'm going to describe this guy. So, according to the Bible, it says, can you pierce his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Though the sword reaches him, it cannot avail, nor does the spear, dart, or javelin. Darts are regarded as straw. So, like if you throw a dart at this guy, it's like just a piece of straw. It's not going to penetrate. It goes on to say this, his undersides are like sharp pieces of pottery. He spreads pointed marks in the mire. On earth there is nothing like him which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing. Now, what's a Leviathan? Hold on, before I call on you, let me read one more piece of scripture, see if you guys can all tell me. Starting in about verse 16, it says, his eyes are like the eyelids of morning. Out of his mouth go burning light, sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame of fire goes out of his mouth. What did I just describe? A dragon. Do we have historical records of dragons in almost every ancient culture? Yeah. In fact, back in 1271, there was an explorer by the name of Marco Polo. I always have to tell your parents, this is not the game they played in pool. He was an explorer. He reported the Chinese emperor raised dragons to pull his chariots in parades. By 1611, they actually put it in writing. They had the post of royal dragon feeder. Do we have evidence all over the planet that these things were real? Yeah. Do I think they were real? Yeah, I do. In fact, there was a town in France that actually changed its name after someone defeated one of these. You say, okay, but wait, Mr. Brad, how in the world can something breathe smoke and fire? Well, first off, let's answer this. Are there amazing creatures out there today that defy explanation? Think about an electric eel. Delivers 500 volts on demand. It doesn't shock himself, doesn't shock his mate when he reproduces, and he recharges himself without an extension cord. And he lives in water. Or how about this? Lightning bugs. Everybody in here called a lightning bug? Does it burn your hand? No. When your parents and grandparents were older, there's a place in East Tennessee, they were paying 25 cents per lightning bug. That place was called Oak Ridge. You know why? They were trying to figure out, how do you give off cold light? Because all the light we've ever been able to produce, even fluorescent light, you lose some of the energy from heat. Yes, sir. Yeah, the light still stays on you sometimes if you do that, right? Yeah. If you put them in a jar, it'll glow in the jar. So think about this. Let's go back to a dragon. What would you need? You got to have a gas and you got to have a way to ignite it, right? Do we have animals today that produce large amounts of methane gas? Like cows? Oh yeah, lots. All you'd have to have is a way to ignite it. Now, Are there animals that will purposefully go down into the Amazon River and pick up rocks in their mouth, strike them together with their teeth to produce a spark? Yeah. So do I think it's possible?
I was reading this book about dragons.
Yeah.
It said that they either use their teeth to ignite or they pick up rocks.
Exactly. I think some of the dinosaur fossils that we've discovered that have those elegant horns that were empty may have been dragons because we don't know what they stored in those empty horns. All right. Job is a post-flood book. And what we mean by that is it's actually written after the events of the flood. Now, what day were dinosaurs created on? Day 6. And yet we're reading about the behemoth and the leviathan in a book written after the flood. Wouldn't that mean they had to be on the boat? Now, you guys have heard me teach on the ark, right? Ark was definitely big enough to hold animals, but remember this, 2 things. Number 1, who created all the animals? God did. Number 2, did Noah have to take adult animals on the boat? Could he have taken juveniles? Yeah. You ever seen what a dinosaur comes from? An egg. Largest dinosaur egg ever discovered would fit very cleanly in both of my hands. So is it possible he took juvenile dinosaurs on the boat? Yeah. Only question we really got to deal with before I open it up for y'all's questions, what do you think happened to them? Let me rephrase that question. What do most books say? Okay. He said a meteorite. He's absolutely right. Asteroid, meteorite. But you know what? That really causes me more questions than it does answers, because how do you selectively kill stuff on the other side of the planet? You ever thought about that? Like, meteorite, asteroid hits over here. How do you kill certain animals over here and leave other animals?
It also said that just one volcano erupted, like the
Earth is bigger than one volcano. You're right. Much, much bigger. Yeah. Say that a little bit louder. Yeah. She said, wouldn't there be a giant crater from it? Absolutely. And I think it probably would have messed up things like our orbit, the tilt, the spin, all kinds of things. I think it would have probably decimated life if this were true. There's about 27 theories of what killed them. I brought 5 of them. The one you guys are going to hear about the most is that asteroid or that meteorite. Number 2, a nearby exploding star flooded the earth with intense radiation, resulting in fatal mutation for dinosaurs' offspring. Number 3, the earth's climate became too warm, too cold, too dry, or too wet for the dinosaurs' health. Number 4, change in the dinosaurs' diet resulted in weakened eggshells that broke after being laid. Sad to say, number 5 is a scientific theory, and you can ask your parents if you don't understand this one. A laxative plant in the dinosaurs' diet disappeared and they all died of constipation. I don't think the last one's a really good scientific theory. Do I have an answer what I think killed them? Yeah. If you stop and think about this for just a minute, God's creation, initially, did he say it was just good or did he say it was very good? Look at Genesis 1:31. He says it's very good. And I think in that environment, I think they were thriving. Somebody read me Genesis 1:29 and 30. You want to read it? Really loud. You got it? There you go. Yep, Genesis 1:29 and 30. Okay, give me the next 2 verses.
God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit."
And verse 30 says, also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth, which there is life, I've given every green herb for food, and it was so. Prior to the flood, what were both man and animals? According to the Bible, what we just read, what were man and animals? Yeah, we're vegetarian. Now, I realize some of your dads right now are like, no, I like the grill. But according to the Bible, both man and animals were vegetarian. Now, that tells me something. That tells me how we could have coexisted without these guys biting us, right? Because we're all vegetarian. It also tells me how we can get them all on a boat and then not eat each other because they're all what? Vegetarian. Also helps me understand how Noah could have gotten the food necessary because they're all what? They're all vegetarian. In fact, it's not until Genesis 9, verse 3, right after the flood, that God finally says, okay, now you can eat meat. So do I think that all this was possible? Yeah. Here's what I think. I think prior to the flood, God created a beautiful environment that they thrived in. And I think sin basically started the downfall of everything. Because if you look, Genesis chapter 3, God doesn't just curse the serpent, the man, and the woman. He also curses the earth, which means he took something that was really good and now it's not going to be as good. And I think they were on the ark, but when they came off, I don't think they thrived as much. I think the flood kicked off the ice age. If we had lots of time, we may get into that one time soon. I'll teach you guys how the ice age fits in with the Bible, but just trust me, ice age right after the flood, which means they can't roam to the 2 poles because they're cold-blooded creatures, right? So they're limited where they can go. Oh, and by the way, now man can eat meat, right? So if your dad or mom sent you out and said, hey, I want you to go kill us something to eat, and you see a squirrel, you see a possum, and you see a stegosaurus, which one are you going after? That one's too small to feed your family, because here at Rolling Hills, we have big families. That one we leave for the people in Arkansas. We could eat on that guy for a week. All right, I actually accomplished my goal. I wanted to be done before 8 so I could answer some questions. If you guys have comments, questions, adults, y'all can jump in here too at this time. Yes, sir. Yeah. What if the asteroid landed in the water? It could have, but think about the tsunami wave it would put out, and it would still affect things like the orbit, the spin, the tilt. It'd be a pretty big deal. And by the way, if an asteroid hit the water over here, how do you selectively kill the animals, say, in China? Yeah. So this is going to surprise you guys. I think they were still roaming when Jesus walked the earth. I don't know that he saw one, but I think they were here. And when I say that, how many of you guys have seen a rhinoceros in the wild? Not in a zoo, but in the wild. Not many folks here. We know they exist, right? And in some zoos, they've got them, but not many people have seen them in their natural environment. I think dinosaurs probably are the same way back then. I think they were still around, but I don't think they were thriving. Because what have we always done to animals we fear? We hunt them, we kill them. You're right. Yeah. And actually, there have been some winged dinosaurs, pterodactyls, pteranodons that within recent times folks have discovered. So do I think it's been dead 65 minutes? No. I'm going to tell you guys a funny little joke or a little story. Sometimes I talk about the Egyptian pyramids and what it took to build them. The stones for the Egyptian pyramids, they came from a marble quarry about 200 miles away. So that would be like Memphis, right? How do you drag a stone that weighs 60 tons from Memphis to here without any machinery? Now, I know what they show you guys sometimes in books. In a book, they'll have pictures of the stone, and it'll be on logs, and they're rolling it. But where were the pyramids built? In the desert. What would happen to that log? It would bury, right? The best answer I've ever gotten for how they built those pyramids came from a 7-year-old child who came up. He pulled on my pants leg. He said, "Sir, I think I know how they built those pyramids." I said, "How's that?" He said, "I think they hitched them up to dinosaurs." And he may not have been all that wrong. Other comments, questions? Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing about how did they know what to look like if they'd never seen them? The Jurassic Park thing, they're trying that. They're trying to pull DNA, but evolutionists have a problem because DNA has a half-life, which means it breaks down. And if they're pulling DNA out of something, it hadn't been dead 65 million years. We'll go here and then here. Possibly. The problem they're going to have comes back to what do you put it in? Because you got to have something to incubate it. And the biggest egg we've got right now is an ostrich egg. And so if you stop and think about, okay, maybe they can get the DNA, the genome for that animal, and then put everything together, and maybe they can clone it from, zap a cell, use a stem cell, put the material in there, let it grow. But what do we put it in? That's where they're going to hit a pretty big roadblock. What about who? Yeah, so she asked the question, what about dodo birds? There have been a lot of animals that have gone extinct. Saber-toothed tigers, dodo birds, other things. Do we know why they go extinct? No. Do we know that they were definitely real? Yeah, we've got enough evidence. Do I think that at some time in the past there were a lot of animals that existed that we don't see today? Absolutely. Do I think that we're breeding animals to get new species even today? Yeah, I mean, we didn't have near the amount of dog species that we've got. They're breeding dogs for everything. Short hair, long hair, little cheesy poodle, sweater dogs, whatever. I apologize if I just offended you, but that's not a dog. But they're all still what? They're all still dogs, right? Yes, sir. Okay, yeah. They started reproducing, and earlier in the film, Dr. Ian Malcolm said that said something, and then he said something the exact opposite later. I remember in that movie they were saying they were giving them a certain mineral chemical so that they wouldn't be able to reproduce, but oops, they found a way around that. Do I think that's going to happen today? Like, do I think you guys are going to go to Walmart or Chick-fil-A and have to worry about T-Rexes coming after you? Probably not in your lifetime. Do I think that they are trying to get the DNA from these animals? Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. I know of at least 3. So there's one that I don't show that I have 100% confidence in. It's down in Texas, the Glen Rose Paluxy tracks. There's so much. So a lot of the stuff that I show when I go to universities, I know that there are folks who are gunning to refute me. And so I'm really, really picky about what I show. But I've actually seen the Glen Rose tracks, and man, it's just, you can't get around it. It's frustrating because stuff like that, where evolutionists have either tried to purposefully discredit it, destroy it, and yet, yeah, we've got human and dinosaur tracks together. Correct. Yeah. 2 in America, 1 in Europe. Because he was found in Texas. No, I'm just kidding. He was found in Argentina. Yeah. Let's say there was an asteroid, and what? Right. Right. He said, how could they kill a dinosaur but not kill a beetle? Or why would they leave frogs? Or why would they leave some of the amphibious creatures that have thinner membrane skin? Yeah, it's a good question. One of the things I want to make sure I leave you guys with, okay? When you hear the word dinosaur, do not think millions and billions. What I want you to think is coexisted with man. One of the things that we're going to work on in our sessions is it's not science versus the Bible, because science, God is the author of science, right? Real science points back to him, and they go hand in glove together. Yes, ma'am. Say that one more time. Okay, that's a great question. She said, how do you know it's a dinosaur bone when you find a fossil? Because it's not like they have little labels on them, right? They don't come with a tag saying, hey, I'm whatever. What we have to do is what we call comparative anatomy or comparative analysis. And so, for instance, this particular one, I can tell pretty quick that this is part of a vertebra, sits in here like that. But then I have to do this. I have to say, all right, how big is it? So we take measurements across, measurements through it, and I say, all right, what other creature had a vertebra in that size range? But I also got to think, this could be an adult or a kid. I don't know if this was like an Argentinosaurus that was small, or if this was a large velociraptor. So I got to take every point that I can and try to figure out what does this most closely resemble. Thankfully, there are databases and computers that can do that for us now. We dump it all in there and it spits it out and goes, there's a 98% probability this is a blah. Yeah. We don't, because acid and soft tissue doesn't stick around much, right? So we don't have any of the acid. Basically, all that they're going on is kind of what they think. And that's another thing is you guys got to realize just because scientists say something doesn't make it true. You know how many times science has had to correct itself? A bunch. Let me give you one real quick example. Anybody know how George Washington died? Okay, they actually killed him by bleeding him to death. When everybody seen the barber poles, the blue and red striped poles? That meant you could go get your hair cut and you could get bled. Okay, they thought bleeding would get rid of the dirty, bad bugs out of your body and you would get healthy again. They bled George Washington. He didn't get healthy. So guess what they did? Bled him again, and he died. In that case, we realized, oops, science didn't know the best thing. Yeah. Do you have a question? Yeah. Say that one more time. Why did they? Why didn't they make a big deal about? Why did they make a big deal about it? That's a great question. She said, why didn't they make a big deal about dodo birds going extinct? Probably because, two reasons. One, it doesn't fit the evolutionary perspective of living millions and millions of years ago. And two, if I put a dinosaur figurine on this table and a dodo bird on this table, I guarantee you there's going to be a whole lot more kids over at that table. Parents in this room, it is the sugar stick candy they are using to introduce your kids to the evolutionary theory. I promise you. A lot of the kids in this room, probably by age 5, were already hearing from the media, dinosaurs walked this earth long before man ever did, millions of years ago kind of stuff. So I hit somebody's happy spot tonight.
Another animal that went extinct, we actually have full hard evidence that there was an animal called the had a radiant tiger, it had a giant jaw, but if an asteroid did hit the earth, it would have gone extinct on an island. But like, why do you got a little island if you
Right? There's a lot of animals like that we kind of are scratching our head going, how do they fit into the big picture? Yeah. Possibly. My personal feeling is that we have probably uncovered dragon fossils and called it some kind of a dinosaur. But because the fossils don't come with the label that says I was a dragon, we don't know that. Yes, sir.
Do you think that, like, somewhere where we haven't seen them, there are still dinosaurs or dragons?
Okay, that's a great question. So, I'm going to tell a story that I normally wouldn't tell in a university setting, okay? So I was in South Africa, and I was teaching, and I got to go to a school of preaching in South Africa. And South Africa is a little rougher. They don't have quite all the nice amenities. They actually had a chalkboard. Do you guys know what a chalkboard is? Okay, good. On this chalkboard, one of the teachers, he was going through the book of Job, and he had drawn a dinosaur, just kind of sketched one out, and he was going to talk about Job chapter 40 that particular day. One of the kids, one of the students walks in, looks at the board and goes, oh, that's Makiki Mumbo, and goes and takes his seat. Well, the professor, the teacher, looked at him and says, what are you talking about? He goes, my granddad, he saw one of those. And he described it to a T, told him where it was located. Really, really cool to think there's possibly some of those creatures still around. Now, do I share that in university settings? No, because we don't have like hardcore, hey, this is exactly when, where, how. Do I believe it happened? I know the teacher that did it, and I got the student's name, so yeah, I think it really did happen. Think about this. Have we explored every part of the ocean? Is it possible there's something down there that we haven't? Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give you guys something. I'm going to give your parents something to really chew on when they go home tonight. What is the only animal that continues to grow throughout its lifespan? It's a reptile. All other animals, they have a growth phase, and then they plateau off. Like humans, we grow from about age 13 to 22, and then we flatten, and then we shrink at the end, right? Not so with a reptile. As long as a reptile is living, eating, breathing, it keeps growing. That's why some of the anacondas down in Florida are so big. Think about this. If you took a Komodo dragon and you let him live to the ages of some of the patriarchs in the early books, Adam 930, Methuselah 969. You think that Komodo dragon could get kind of big? Oh yeah. I'm gonna go behind you and then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
So I nearly saw a Komodo dragon once.
You did?
Yeah.
That is very cool. That is very, very cool. Not too many people can say that.
People said
Yes, I saw some video of that.
And the Bible literally states that the Leviathan is a winding serpent.
It's a water dweller too, if you think about it. So lots of cool stuff. Any questions from the back rows? Wow, you guys are quiet. Y'all are easy. Yes, sir. So it's one of those circular reasoning deals where they find a bone in a layer. Well, they've already said that layer is somewhere around 50 to 100 million years old. We find a bone there, that means that bone has to be that old. And so they date the bones by the layers, but then they turn right around and date the layers by according to which bones they find. It's circular reasoning, drives me crazy. Do I believe it? Absolutely not. And as we go through some of this, we'll get into like age of the earth, dating methods, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, she asked the cool question. All right, you guys can tune me out for a minute because I'm gonna get really weird and technical. Really, also gonna get really gross and cool. So there's a place in Tennessee called the Body Farm, where they actually allow human bodies, cadavers to decompose in order to build a database. It's the best database literally on the planet. So for instance, somebody in London can call and say, hey, we found a body, here's the condition it was in, here's all the things we know about it, and they'll take a body, put it in the Body Farm, recreate that, take pictures every day, and they can tell them, they'll say, okay, your body was this many days, almost to the hour old. The half-life of DNA, I want to say is 512, but it may be 560 years. I'll check on that. If we're finding soft tissue that's got blood vessels and DNA in it, it's not been dead more than 1,000 years, period. I would go so low as to say a couple hundred years if you're finding soft tissue. So, yes, sir.
Why don't people like believe with the evidence that we have that they did not live 6
That's a great question. His question is, why don't people believe that evidence, that stuff didn't live that long ago? And I'm going to answer you, but I'm going to make sure all the parents in this room hear, and that is because there is a major battle going on right now between light and dark. And the people in the dark world, they don't want you to believe this right here. And if we say humans and dinosaurs lived together, that supports this right here. And so what they're doing is they're trying to get everybody to come to their side and believe these creatures walked millions and millions of years ago. And it's actually one of the first ways they hook you into thinking of things being really, really old. Yeah. Oh, when I say soft, I took 2 pair of like forceps and it's spongy, soft, like soft. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How come there wasn't any recording of dinosaurs in that?
I'm not sure if you're talking about within the last 1,000 years. When was the word dinosaur recorded? 1845. So it's only been roughly 160, 70 years that we've even had that particular word. So is there possibility that people use different words? They made drawings of things? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Do I think that there could be 1 or 2 real ones on the earth now? I think so. I think there's places that we have not fully looked at. So Lord willing, not next month, September, I'll be going to Brazil. And there's some rainforest down there that we have not even looked at hardly much of nothing at. And there can be all kind of critters down there that we don't know about. So do I think that they could still be there or maybe in South Africa? Possibly. Say that again?
Are dinosaurs?
Are they reptiles? Yes. Classically classified as reptiles, cold-blooded. Okay, I'll give you Megalodon, but I'm not going to give you Bigfoot. Bigfoot goes in the ape turn it into human category. We'll actually maybe spend a session like this dealing with something like that, where we talk about alleged fossil man, that kind of thing. We'll go here and then here.
So do you think Jonah is said in the Bible that he was swallowed by a fish?
Yes.
Sharks are classified as fish.
Correct.
Maybe.
Could have been a megalodon. If you read the Bible, it says that God prepared the fish, so may have been like a one-off special thing that God did. I'm actually doing an underwater book right now with a guy who takes pictures of stuff underwater. He's got some really, really cool pictures of whale sharks that are huge. And I look at those and I think, man, it wouldn't take much more to get a person inside something like that. But then I think, if God can parade animals in front of Adam to name them, he can get them in a fish to save them too. Yes, sir.
If they found soft tissue like DNA in it,
Yeah.
why haven't scientists been able to at least make one cell?
They're trying. Short answer is they are trying. What they've got to do, though, is they've got to be able to replicate the DNA enough, or figure out something that they can culture that in to make it grow. So, you guys enjoy this. I didn't put you to sleep. Y'all been sitting here for an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, which is like really cool for me, because that means I didn't put you to sleep. I think this is something we're probably going to do maybe monthly. We're going to call it warrior training. So if you guys want to do some warrior training, what are the two things you need? A Bible and a notebook, so you guys can take notes, because some of the stuff we're going to talk about is going to overlap, meaning we may talk about the Ice Age or fossil man, but we may sneak in some dinosaur stuff or some Age of the Earth stuff and kind of tie it all together. Say that again. Also need a pen. You are correct. She's going to be a future accountant. I appreciate, in all seriousness, everybody coming out tonight. I appreciate very, very much the parents bringing their kids out. What we're trying to do is to equip this group right here, train them up to be warriors, so that when they hear words like millions and billions, and even when they hear the word dinosaur, that there's a little bit of a red flag and they're listening more attentively maybe than they would have before. They've been awesome. I don't know who trained these kids, but man, kudos to moms and dads in this room. I'm going to ask Mr. Justin if he would leave us in a prayer, and I'll stick around for a few minutes. There are some books up here the parents can look at. I obviously didn't think there would be this many people. I brought a couple of copies of this if you guys want copies of it. This is a really, really old issue that we did on Think Magazine on dinosaurs. They're free, take home. There's also some books just to look at, just to kind of give you an idea of material that is good that you can bring into your house. When my kids were this age right here, we trained them where when they saw the words millions, man, it was almost like they'd go get a Sharpie and just start, just like, nope, we don't allow that in our house kind of stuff. And I encourage you, get them thinking that way so that they realize, hey, that doesn't mesh with the Bible.